Ladies and gentlemen, it is baseball Hall of Fame season. It's football Hall of Fame season. It's Hall of Fame season. And as such, we have put together, well, I'd call this a blue ribbon panel, but it was the best I could get, of a group of people who just love talking about the Hall of Fame. And we're looking at the baseball Hall of Fame. Unlike the football Hall of Fame that we do, we're not acting as if we're going to be electing anybody. We're just shooting the shit. We're just going to talk about some of the people who have made it this far, how they're doing, and will they make it any further? With that being said, gentlemen, do we want to introduce ourselves? I'll just start. Kirk Buchner, owner, operator, sober today, sort of Notinhalloffame.com. Also the Fictitious Athlete Hall of Fame, check that out. Fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, check that out. The United States Athletic Hall of Fame, check that out. Shameless plugs, I gotta do it. Won't promote my book today, but I thought I'd we'll just sort of like go from there. Who do I have with me? Vinny, one of my regular contributors. How you doing, brother?
Doing good. A month since graduation, and hopefully the PR man from the New Zealand Breakers gets back to me on a potential working there. It'll be virtually. I'm not going to actually fly to New Zealand, in case anyone's curious.
If you do, and I've had some time there, the men are rugged, so are the women.
Also, this social media handle is dope as hell. Like, make sure you check that out.
All right. Longhorn Dave, how you doing?
Good. Great to be here again, Kirk. Dave Whitlock, also known as Longhorn Dave or LHD on Sports. I typically put out a weekly blog highlighting a sportsman of the week, but I also do like to focus on the Baseball Hall of Fame. Put out a blog this week on who I would vote for. And I put out a blog maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago about the whole PED scandal. So you can go there or just hang into this podcast, and I'll be sure to tell you everything I think about both.
All right, sounds good. Ted, another regular contributor.
Hey, how are you? Ted Crockett, Detroit Tiger fan, Southeast Michigan. Follow the Halls. Just dig into the data. No podcast for me.
Alec.
My Twitter handle is the Fake Sith. I usually like to talk about, when it comes to Hall of Fames, my personal preference is the baseball and the rock and roll one. Vote for Scott Rowland, elect more Negro Leaguers.
Okay. And Chris, welcome back.
Hey, thanks. Chris Meridian, down here in southeastern Wisconsin, just outside of Waukesha. Got my Kate Tom Bowers Summer League shirt on tonight.
Nice.
And grew up a Brewers fan, so hoping to see, well, I don't think we got any Brewers that are pushing for the Hall anytime soon, but glad to see them turn things around here lately.
And we also have Jeff, although I think you put yourself on mute there.
Jeff Schlegel, you can check me out on youtube.com/SchlegDaddyTV. And if you're into pro wrestling, brother, youtube.com/OTRS Central, Twitter handle OTRS Central, and the Jeff Schlegel. I am looking forward to this. As you can see, I am prepared and ready to roll. I broke out the court bats and everything.
You had Uncle Phil before. What?
He's trying to make it with the theme, Kirk.
I don't know. I kind of like the Uncle Phil thing, because if there's somebody that I really wanted to throw out, he could have just sort of done that, with Uncle Phil, like he sort of did.
I can break it out at any time.
Not Fresh Prince. Yeah, it's not Fresh Prince. DJ Jazzy Jeff, who's wondering if you want fries with that. Moving on.
You want fries with that?
Oh, what else is he doing?
Something else. I don't know. Maybe he wants onion rings for a change.
I like onion rings. I like
potato wedges.
Ooh, that'll be good. But I'm moving into moving to Winnipeg, so pierogi country. Anywho, let's start off with I just want to start off with those who look like they have a good shot. And right now, from not Mr. Tibbs, who does a great job as a baseball tracker, there's 3 people who are projected over right now, but not really projected, just based on the votes that come in. I think it's safe to say, because we've seen this every year, a lot of the younger voters will submit their votes and are not really frightened to sort of say, this is what we're thinking. A lot of the older voters don't submit that publicly. And we generally see these numbers go down. So David Ortiz is right now over the 75% threshold from known ballots, as is Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds. So let's start off with these three. Let's go with Ortiz. I'm personally of that opinion. I wish Evan was here as a Red Sox fan, but he's not. Do we think David Ortiz is going to be one and in?
Yeah, I think he will. Remember, Ivan Pudge Rodriguez got in barely with 70%, 76% of the vote in 2017. He, of course, has the same steroid allegations as David Ortiz. So I think he gets in, but I think it's towards that 75, 76, very close skin of my teeth mark.
I think Ortiz has one thing going against him. Or going for him, excuse me. And that was, he was quite a bit of a media darling throughout his career.
Yeah.
He still is. Like, if you look at it just from importance to team and what they meant to the organization, for my money, Manny meant a little bit more than Ortiz did. But when you look at how friendly the media is to him, I kind of agree with Alec. Like, he would be one of those guys that I could see right on that borderline. He either just misses and gets in next year, or he's got a shot this year. I'm wondering if, like, the last year push for Bonds and Clemens is going to push him down just a little bit, might keep him out. I just find it interesting that he seems to be getting a lot more of a pass than some of the other guys. There's just a lot of discrepancy here in terms of, like, PED users, alleged PED users.
I think, and Evan and I have talked about this a lot, and I certainly want a lot of your opinions on this, especially when we talk about the next two guys. Maybe we'll just bring them in now, Clemens and Bonds. My Mendoza line, to borrow a term here, is 2004, which is when, after that and after the Mitchell report, when they said, okay, we are now going to agree as baseball players that if we take PEDs, we're going to be suspended. Prior to that, it was the Wild West. So I personally don't give a shit about any player who juiced before that, because we all knew they were doing it, and there was no penalty for anyone who did. So as much as Bonds and Clemens denied, neither of them ever got caught, which is I think important. Ortiz was named in the Mitchell report, but none of those three guys were ever suspended.
Actually, I interrupt you. He was not in the Mitchell report. He was in the New York Times report that had, of the 104 players that had Alex Rodriguez in it.
Okay, but they were never tested positive in terms of
Unlike
baseball rule. So
the way I personally view it when it comes to the steroid thing is that I'm going to go out and line just say this. I don't give it. I don't care. I don't care. Like, there's people that did, like, greenies in the past, cork bats in the past. I mean, this is a sport that, despite still not having Joe Jackson inducted, they have a Field of Dreams game. They also still prop up all this other stuff. I understand they may say it's not connected, but they're in bed with them. Like, I really don't care. I don't really care.
Yeah, I know. Realize it's a different process, different thing.
Yeah, come on, they're the same thing. They're more of the same. It's the same.
I'm saying, but once Bud Selig got in, like, how can you put the sheriff in charge of everything in the damn Hall of Fame and then not put the players that he was able to profit off of? That's ridiculous.
Well, this is what the argument is.
Even when you talk about, like, the Bonds and the Clemens, to your point, Kirk, about the Mendoza line of 2004 and before, then where's the Mendoza line for a Gaylord Perry? A White Ford, known admitted cheaters, Aaron's, God bless them. Like, these are guys that were doing methamphetamines and so forth. Like, those are other forms of performance enhancers. Like, why did steroids get such a significantly bigger shame attached to them, as opposed to guys throwing spitballs and all this other crap that they were doing over the decades of baseball?
And moving forward, I mean, like, I think if we have this debate 15 years from now, I hope I still have my hair then, that Jose Altuve's, are we going to be talking about his role in the Astro scandal? I don't know.
A couple of years if you talk about Beltran with that.
True.
Next year, yeah.
That's gonna be something.
I think what really was why this set off so many alarms is because this was the year. It's because it was like with Bonds is breaking the all-time home run record and the single season home run record before Sosa McGuire. during the Star area, all these records were being breaking like one after another, and they really turned a blind eye because with the Sosa McGuire chase, because it brought baseball back in popularity from the strike. And that's why I don't get really is they're tape judging, and they're just and like, you hypocrite, like 20 years ago you were praising them, now you're saying, now you're looking them in shame. Like,
Okay, so two things to that. Yeah, we knew back then that McGuire was taking shit. I mean, we all saw that that locker room thing with the. Well,
Andrelstein Dion.
thank you. Yeah, I could.
Tony La Russa
Yeah, but now-
didn't care about it. Like, he was fine with both with the A's and the Cardinals.
Right,
with
but
it.
things took a change when Bonds started juicing too. And I think a big part of that, and I don't know that it has anything to do with him being black so much as it has something to do with him being not giving a shit about the media.
It could be both.
Probably a little
Maybe
bit.
both. I don't know.
As someone who works for Zenny Abraham, who has been a part of the Bay Area for his entire life,
Okay.
it is definitely both. I can definitely assure you, it is both.
Okay. So then that's really the tipping point for everything. Because going back to Alex's point, when we were looking at how, yes, there was a blind eye, but it was also something that we enjoyed, or a lot of people bought into the chase of McGuire chasing Maris. Very few of us, well, actually, I don't want to throw that in. I guess I got my little San Fran jersey on here for that. There was a lot of people who were against Barry Bonds surpassing Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron didn't endorse him either. I mean, he did to a certain point, but from what I was reading in the past, the Bonds camp was trying to get Hank Aaron to show up, and he never did. So it wasn't necessarily a passing of the torch. It was because Aaron pretty much said, you're juicing.
In one of his final interviews, Hank Aaron admitted that, yeah, Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame in one of his final interviews.
Well, I don't think Hank Aaron ever really said that he shouldn't have been. It was just, but I don't think he necessarily tactfully.
He wasn't a
endorsed
champion
as
for
the-
him.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
He wasn't the type of champion that maybe a Willie Mays, his godfather, would have been for a Barry Lamar Bonds.
Right.
Right. Yeah. That's actually better wording. Thanks on that, Jeff.
I'd like to weigh in on the counter. Can I weigh in on the counterpoint for the PEDs?
Yeah.
First of all, I get all the rationale that people want that are okay with voting in PED guys. Everybody was doing it, especially Bud Selig, who I despise, maybe a mild term. I just feel like he's one of the
He
worst
steroids.
commissioners.
If he took steroids, they were broke.
Right. And but and then the hallowed people that hover above where you guys are going to cut them down is, there is an integrity about being in the Hall of Fame and being elected to it. And the quote integrity clause, which is only like 3 words in this 2-paragraph thing, but I just struggle to look at what they did, even in the context, even in that, and say, yep, put them in. They should be right there next to the other guys. Admittedly, other guys probably did stuff too. Some of them caught. The book Ball 4 by Jim Bouton came out and exposed a lot of things. So that's all the context there. But particularly because of some of the records and the way I kind of saw it go down that you guys touched around was, McGuire and Sosa had this amazing 1998, broke all the records, and Bonds is sitting there like, I could easily kill these records if I just do the same things they're doing. And next thing you know, he obliterated them, and to the point of almost making, when you're walking with the bases loaded, when his, he's got 200 walks a year, whatever, it just got ridiculous. But it's not just Bonds. Let's talk about Clemens too. Now I'm a University of Texas guy. Clemens pitched for my Astros in 2004, and I'm not voting for him either. I think he crossed the line. You start to look at some of how his numbers dipped, and then even before the late, when he was in his 40s, when they went up, you could start, there were some bad years, and all of a sudden there were some good years. And I'm sure he was taking things to help his body heal. That's what this is about. It's body healing and body strength. And I don't vote for those 2 guys. I did vote for Ortiz, or I don't have a vote, but I would vote for Ortiz. a little bit not quite in that same color, a little bit a generation after the game had been cleaned up a little bit. Yeah, he might have, particularly before the testing, but the 500 home runs and the leadership and the MVP finishes all kind of tilt me to put him in and not Bonds and Clemens. I'm not saying I'm right. Everybody's got to make their decision, but that's my stance.
Yeah, when I think about, I think Ted, thank you for posting that, the clause that we're talking about here, the integrity clause. You know, you can go back throughout history and you say, Cap Anson did everything that he could to keep the game segregated. I certainly think he's the shit behavior that doesn't deserve to be recognized anywhere, but he is recognized. You know, I believe he was even a inaugural inductee in the Hall of Fame. Rogers Hornsby, you know, plenty of allegations about him being a KKK member back in his playing days, and certainly
Ty Cobb.
Actually, the Ty Cobb thing, that's
Ty
a little
Cobb was-
different.
Yeah,
That's a people always accuse that. The reason as to why the Ty Cobb accusation happened is because there was a person in the media who didn't like Ty Cobb, and so we made those allegations against him, and people it's still kind of haunted. So the Ty Cobb stuff is BS. In fact, quite the opposite. He was a big proponent of segregation. He was a proponent of integration, not segregation. He was a proponent of integration. He was oftentimes someone that wanted the Negro Leagues players to be in.
Yeah, I'm just coming back to, like, as I think about all the people over the years, like Charlie Comiskey as an owner was a complete and total piece of garbage. You know,
Tom Yank, I think the Red Sox owner, Tom Yankee.
Yeah.
yes.
Kennesaw Mountain is in.
I want to just ground back to what Dave is talking about, like the integrity piece. And we talk about like the character issues when it comes to the Hall. Like, to me, the PED things only exposes the larger hypocrisy.
Yes.
Ways. And I look at it and I say, if I look at the Gaylord Perrys of the world, and Hank Aaron and that whole generation was on PEDs, like not PEDs, but amphetamine, greenies, everything else. Like those are performance enhancers too, certainly. It's just interesting that we're drawing the line of demarcation specifically with the PED users and just with certain ones. Because like when you say, hey, maybe no to Bonds or Clemens, but yes to Ortiz, I say, well, what the hell is the difference?
There's another one I see
Point
get
to
passed.
pre-steroid era.
Yeah, I think the other thing that gets to me is this. A lot of the same people who vote for the MVPs are voting for the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
They knew what was up, and
They
had no
knew what was up.
voting Bonds a 7-time MVP.
Clemens, a 7-time Cy Young Award winner.
Right.
I also
you
get
know,
it this way. Did you know that there's also a character clause for those awards as well?
For the MVP,
They just don't care about them. Yeah, there's a character. There's a character. Again, my personal opinion on character, morality is subjective no matter how you slice it. I just think of that pure and simple. And there's a character clause for those places as well, and didn't stop them from. They knew exactly what was going on, and they didn't give it to someone else. They still gave it to them.
Yeah, and Bonds probably could have still been playing another couple years after his contract ran out. Just nobody wanted to touch him because
They colluded. I fully believe Major League Baseball and the owners colluded to keep him out.
Yeah, and well, I'll go a step further. I'm going to say that I think there's a bit of collusion here. Why did this all this tradition of having a 15-year wait change to 10 years? They want to get these guys off the ballot.
Yep.
There's no doubt in my mind.
There's no other reason to change it. There's no doubt they're trying to hurry up and get through this era, and it's not a surprise.
All right,
It'll be interesting to see what the Veterans Committee guys will do with these players.
I don't trust them either. I don't trust them either.
They're even worse.
I don't trust those people.
Some people, Graham Warmack of Sabar had a idea. I don't know if he still has it for a separate steroids committee. Steroids committee.
No.
I know some of you guys
took it.
That's the thing.
Yeah, like I would
That's the
put that
hardest
on the
part.
same level. I would put that on the same level as a pre-integration, like a pre-1947 committee.
Yeah.
Like we're saying specifically for that. You might have like a old school committee.
Let's have Ken Seiko
my
on
favorite.
that committee. Okay, so here's all the people I injected.
I think Vinny brings up a really good distinction though. is why is the character so different for an MVP or Cy Young award? But then when all of a sudden, when you get to the Hall of Fame, the game profited off of them, used their name and their likeness for many years, and all of a sudden they're not good enough for the museum. Where if you think about the history of the game and you think about the guys that you absolutely cannot tell the story of the game without, it's guys like Bonds, it's guys like Clement. They are a major part of the story and the history. Same thing with Sosa. You know, these guys.
Well, okay, so let's talk about Sosa. Because like I rather than just sort of like go in terms of where they are in terms of their voting, but since we're on this PED hill, let's talk about Sosa and Ramirez. Jeff, you're a Chicago guy, right? So
Yeah.
So Sosa to me is a very interesting candidate when it comes to this. I have never seen anyone other than Vizquel fall out of love, like where the media just fell out of love with somebody so quickly. And his numbers do not reflect, especially when you look at the other PED guys. I mean, Sosa was not as good as Bonds, but from what we've seen, his numbers reflect a Hall of Famer. Why is Sosa having zero shot here? And I want to open that up to all of you here.
Jeff knows this more than anyone. He can answer this.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. The cork bat in 2003. Like I even remember watching that game live that day against the Devil Rays, back when they were the Devil Rays. That is another strike against him. I think even the way he kind of ended his Chicago career on kind of unceremoniously leaving the Wrigley Field early, that last game in 2004, like turn the organization against him, turn the media against him. Whereas you might look at a guy like, let's say, David Ortiz, and you say, Boston loves him, the city loves him, and the organization embraces him. And the Cubs have intentionally for almost 2 decades waged this kind of war against Sammy Sosa, which is complete horse hockey. Like he was the guy for that team in the 90s. As much as I love the guys like the Graces and the Sandbergs and the Dawsons, he was not only the biggest and most important star for that organization, he was arguably the biggest and most important star of the league for probably a 5 to 6 year stretch from about 97, 98 to 2002, 2003, when you look at the entirety of it. You know, he's the one that changed everything about the culture of Chicago, as much as they don't want to give him credit, because he's the one that he was there and they said, well, we can't have him be like, say, hey, Ernie Banks, you know, we can't have him go and never play on a contender, which is what hiring Dusty Baker in 2003 and that run of 2003 season. I think it's a matter of the media turned against him. The organization turned against him. It became popular to make him a punching bag. Like in recent years, as you look at like whatever's going on with his pigmentation and how he's dramatically changed in terms of his look, he just unfortunately becomes one of those sacrificial lambs. And when I hear like somebody talks about like a Todd Helton, they're talking about his Hall of Fame case. And when I look at Sammy Sosa, are you nuts? Like I would say PEDs may be similar to the effect you got from playing at mile high altitude for the majority of your career and half of your games there. And there's a huge distinction in his numbers. Yeah, I think Sammy's just a victim of some of
And also should mention
circumstances.
not caught either.
In terms of the steroid piece you're talking about with Todd.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's referring to the steroids.
Yeah,
Yeah, not with the steroids, but he was caught with the cork bat in 2003.
right.
Yeah, I'm just saying like that becomes that additional layer. That's the difference.
Well, let me throw this out, and I guess this is more for you, Jeff, here. The media will turn on people really quick, especially I think if they feel they were fooled. I tried to find this piece and I couldn't find it. I think Rick Riley was the first guy from Sports Illustrated. Back when Sports Illustrated was a thing.
It's still around, it's just barely a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Is
But-
Rick Riley still a thing? And if so, why?
I don't know. But he did this one piece on Sosa, and basically sort of saying, well, okay, if you want to take a PED test, like, well, I have one with me, because he was one of those people saying, I never did that. And then story after story after story, and Sosa coming out as not the nicest guy in the world. Did the media feel like they were fooled? And once they feel that way, do they then just turn on you really quick?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit like Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods could have been the bad boy of golf. He could have been sitting there and banging everything under the sun and never hid from that. He could have gotten probably all the same endorsement deals, maybe even more.
Sure.
He would have every bit the following, could have won every tournament that he did. But it was a fact, to your point, that people felt they were lied to, both fans and media,
Mhm.
the game, the league. They put him up on this pedestal, and then they found out, oh, there's this whole seedy underbelly. And I think there is a little bit of that, Kirk, when it comes to Sosa, is like, he used to say, I only take the Flintstone vitamins. Baseball has been very, very good to me. And, he did the whole kissy thing, and, there were all these things. And then all of a sudden you just,
Remember,
oh my God.
when he was testifying against Congress, he tried to pretend that he couldn't speak English.
That's right. I can't blame.
Yeah, that's a big one too.
That's
Do
right.
remember that? I mean, the people there, like Paul Merrill, looked like, like such a hero. I believed him. Yes.
Yes, but
Is it-
also now we're in a age in which I don't want to get political here. Now we're in an age in which people not only have so much venomous hatred against the media, but have just as much, if not more, against Congress. So where does that fit into
Okay.
this situation as well?
Vinny, that you just segued this perfectly. So why don't we talk about we want to talk politics?
Oh,
Yeah.
God, Kurt Schilling, here we
Alright.
go.
Well,
Well,
real
hey,
quick,
it's gonna
before
come
we
up.
get onto that, I want to say something else about Sosa.
Yeah.
I think what happens is people see the voting trends, what I call herd voting or herd.
Yeah.
And
Great
if
point.
I have a vote and I'm limited on votes, and I see that Sosa's entered 8th, 9th, and now 10th year, and he's not getting traction, I'm just going to stop voting for him and go somewhere else.
Good
To
point.
keep guys that might have a chance, because everybody 5 years ago could see what was going on, that he had no chance to get in. So why continue voting for him? So
And
you're
you
gonna
let
see
the
that-
20-25% at most holdouts that say, I'm going to vote for him no matter what, but nobody else is going to, even though.
Right. And so he's down to 17% last year. He probably won't get any, he'll get less than that this year. And I think that's a trend that you see a lot. People go up or they go down. And then once they get to a certain point, they're not going to stay stagnant. They're going to drop usually.
It's like the Scott Rowlands of the world after a couple of years going from like 7 or 8%, I think it is, to 45 or 50%.
He got better.
Yeah, he got
I can-
better even more
You
years
can
after
look
his
at,
cruise.
yeah, you can look at the data and know who's going to go up this year and who's not before even
Right.
any of the votes come in. I mean,
Yeah.
it's easy.
You should see how my list would be like if there was no limits.
No, we all know what your list.
You'd have write-ins.
Limits.
There
was
were,
gonna-
Did you
30 on
play
the
before
ballot.
the Civil
You're
War?
probably at about
Yes.
20.
Hall of Famer.
Witness.
I mean,
It-
in the
yes.
baseball group, I was gonna say, but I figured like all you youngins wouldn't get it. Like when you said that you would vote for John Lester, I was gonna say that Vinny would vote for Willie Tyler in Lester, but I don't think anyone would have got that.
Okay, boomer.
Okay, fuck off. I'm not a boomer.
I joke, I kid.
Yeah. Okay. I might be 50, but God, 50. When the hell did that happen? Jesus Christ.
You just turned 50?
I'm gonna turn 50. So well, you're 49, you might as well say 50. What difference
You
does
might
it
as well. I mean, it's much more easier to pinpoint. It's like
Nobody-
saying 99, 100.
Nobody
Is
cares.
Willie Tyler still alive?
I don't know. I'm sure
He's probably
Lester's in
like
a
his
box
80s now,
somewhere.
right? Yeah, I'm old enough to get the reference.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that.
I get the
Boomer!
reference.
All right, so let's go to speaking of crotchety old men, Kurt Schilling. Kurt Schilling has told people not to vote for him, and it's working.
Well,
Yeah.
he's gonna get.
I-
He's gonna get in by the today's game committee, probably in 2023. The state game committee, which is the veterans committee era. Came from 1988.
Hey, Alec, your sound's not coming in too good.
All right. Better.
No,
No, it sounds like you're still speaking from a distance.
From
you
a
just have to
distance.
wait till your battery gets fixed. So Schilling is obviously he's a Hall of Famer. He's going to get in eventually. He's just pissed off too many people. It's his last year, so people took him up on his offer. Don't have to waste on it. Move on. I mean, that's really where he's at. The only issue I see with this is he's just going to clog that veteran committee even more. Keep some other guys that could have been a fringe player out a little bit longer. That's the Schilling issue.
I think the thing with that too, trying to remember who it was, which writer it was. Crap. Doesn't matter.
Dan Shaughnessy.
No.
Yeah.
What was that?
Immediate gag reaction from Vinny. You mentioned that name.
Okay. No, it wasn't Shaughnessy. Actually, not even Bill James. It was not someone who has a vote, but not necessarily a writer. But he said that his belief was he didn't want Schilling to profit off being a Hall of Famer. And the whole thing is they're using his political beliefs against him. And I personally, as long as you're not an extremist, I don't really care what they are. But with Schilling, we've learned this with Pete Rose. Pete Rose is a bigger name because he's not in the Hall of Fame. So will Curt Schilling. You want to make his name less valuable? Put him in the Hall of Fame.
Well, it's kind
honestly
of
what I think.
yeah. Well, I think that's a good point. Is there's almost a conspiracy thought here. Like, let me, Vinny, just for you, put on my Alex Jones tinfoil hat here. But if you
you know the gift very, very well. That has a face.
But if you really think about it, he has more leverage and more benefit to your point about I'm not in the Hall of Fame. Look at the conspiracy against me. He can play like the whole liberal media bias kind of thing. You don't usually hear that associated with baseball. I think, Kirk, you are actually onto something, is that I do wonder if Curt Schilling even truly wants to be in the Hall of Fame. Maybe there's a part of him that says my career deserves it. I should be in there. But maybe it's better for him on the speaking tours and the circuits and in conservative circles in the long term if he's not. And maybe there actually is more profit to be made by not being a Hall of Fame than actually being one.
I got to interview Pete Rose for the site, one of the first interviews I ever got to do. And he told me directly, I'm a bigger name because of this. You know, and he's got that where he just pretty much sits in a place in Vegas all day. And he makes like $1.5 million or something a year from that. Would he be making $1.5 million if it's Hall of Famer Pete Rose as opposed to banned Pete Rose?
Especially when you're the most notable player that's alive that's not in.
Right.
Like, he was the most notable player.
Though in Harold Baines's case, it's the exact opposite.
Yeah, with him, with Harold Baines, it feels like, and even though I said before, yes, he made him, but as a result, I meant this before, I feel bad for the dude at this point because he just feels like a poster child of everything that's wrong with the Hall. And he didn't ask to be inducted. He got in because of,
He was surprised.
Yeah, he's surprised. I feel bad for the dude because he almost felt like, now he's like a big, scapegoat for all the issues. And like, yeah, obviously I don't think his career was worthy as like other people on there, but just an example. But as for Curt Schilling, as Kirk said, as someone who grew up seeing Fox News when I was very little in like 2008 during the election, I remember during that time, I know for a fact how that side of the aisle works. And so often the times, persecution complexes and victim blaming are essential to how a lot of them are. Now, I'm not saying this as a liberal or a conservative. I'm very down the middle, but I know that whenever someone is left out, that is one of their own, they view that as the establishment is against us. They are using us as the victim for their ultimate goal. And as a result, Curt Schilling is in that mold of being that. And yeah, they ran with it last year. They ran with it the year before that, and they're going to run with it this year as well.
Just for the merits of Curt Schilling, and I've always had the problem, and I think of him somewhat similar to a Jack Morris, although I think Kurt's overall playoff performance is probably better. Like, if he didn't have that, you're really only going off of 10 actual full seasons as a big league, like starting pitcher. If he didn't have all of the, if he didn't have the World Series rings with Arizona 2001, 2004, 2007 with the Red Sox, Like, are we even talking about Kirk Schilling as a Hall of Famer?
2,000
Oh,
strikeouts.
Yes,
200
he'd be a
wins.
lock, huge lock. His WAR's high. Yeah, he's got numbers that's not even close to debatable.
Yeah, he has a
I
lot. I
had
mean, it's not
him-
just the
I had him
playoffs;
close
it's
to
regular season
debatable.
as well. It's more
Yeah.
analytically driven, but there is a lot of stuff there. Now, borderline or not, either way, the fact of the matter is he has both of those to his resume. So, I think even if you didn't have the conspiracy or conservative angle, what have you, he would still have a lot of demand.
Yeah,
You
well,
know,
I had him kind of borderline anyway, and I didn't quote vote for him the first few years until I really looked at the strikeout numbers. ERA north of 3.6 is in that Jack Morris and Mike Messina range where I'm like, these are guys that are just kind of they're over 200 wins, great, to over 220 wins or whatever it is. But
Fenway is
that's-
like a hitter's paradise, though.
but he
yeah,
only
the
pitched
errors
4
certainly
years at
factors in.
Fenway at the end of his career. So let's not pretend he spent his entire career at Boston.
He was mostly with the Phillies.
No, I would just say that it was a hitter's era, and it was difficult to get out like Messina with an ERA at near 3. I mean, there's only so many Greg Maddoxes and Tom Glavines out there that could do that. So
And
but-
Pedro
but-
Martinez.
Yeah.
Pedro Martinez, absolutely. But and so yeah, I think his numbers warrant it. I don't think it's a slam dunk as Ted thought. And I don't
is.
hold the politics against him. He's a yes vote for me. He's one of my 8 yes votes.
I think with the playoffs, he becomes a slam dunk. Yes. I think when you talk just
Yeah, the playoffs help.
alone, there's no slam dunk there. That's like you're coming up with the analytics to support it. It doesn't mean he's not. I'm just saying like he's much more borderline, I think, Ted, than respectfully than what you're saying.
Yeah, and again, that's why we disagree. I mean, he's right there with Bob Gibson with WAR. So you look at the numbers, they're there. And again, I don't like the guy, so it's just, but to me, the numbers are clear.
I have this from Glenn, who couldn't be with us because he's in Antarctica. I'm not making that up. That's really where he is. Glenn,
That's awesome.
Glenn, who is proudly blocked by Kurt Schilling on Twitter. This to say, he sent me this note. Schilling has no business being in the Hall of Fame, and it was ketchup on the sock, or he pulled some WWE shit and had a razor blade somewhere and did it all for dramatic effect. I don't think he really believes that, but I thought I'd throw that in because I thought he wanted me to say something. So I thought that was sort of worth mentioning. If we're going to stay with Good Samaritans, let's just briefly look at, because he's not getting in now, Omar Vizquel. Holy shit. I have never seen anyone.
Scumbag.
Well, yeah, I'm sure he wouldn't be the only domestic abuser in the hall.
There's a lot of them. There's a
lot.
lot of them. There's a lot of them.
But
Well, it's not. Well, Omar was an overrated candidate, anyways.
I agree with you.
Well,
Yes, like where did the Omar love come from? I mean,
And the old
came from
compare,
the
they'll
save
say,
percentage.
you'll say, oh, Ozzie Smith, Luis Arrigio. Those guys had at least had a slightly above average bat, and they were solid base runners. Omar never led anything in offense except for maybe sacrifice bunts.
Tell you what it
Exactly
is,
what you want a Hall
is-
of Famer doing, bunting.
It's because they counted hits. That's why he had a bunch of hits. He had a bunch of counting stats.
well,
some
and
of
the
those
Gold
old-
Gloves.
Some of those old timers liked it. Again,
Gloves, though. Okay, let's look at the Gold Gloves are fucking garbage.
Yeah.
I mean, the Wilson defensive players, that's a real metric.
Rafael Palmeiro won as a designated hitter.
I understand. I'm
Yeah.
just saying, like, if we're talking about where the case for Omar Vizquel seems to come out of
Right.
there,
I
like
mean,
it comes from he had 11 Gold Gloves.
right.
Fair.
Not just that. There's
Great
also
defensive
the
player.
save percentage. That's also pretty huge too. The save percentage is the highest ever.
save percentage.
Same percentage.
Yes.
That's run
Well,
safe. is that
fielding
what you're
percentage,
talking about?
put that in the garbage
Yeah,
too.
the save percentage,
I was gonna-
fielding percentage, the 985 fielding percentage. That's what it is. It's the
Dude,
highest all time.
Hockey too, and I forgot.
Fielding percentage,
That
not
save
save percentage.
percentage is garbage. That has Pasto Polanco at both second and third as the best second and third defensive baseman of their position.
I do want to be clear though. I'm not saying that Omar Vizquel was overrated as a like what didn't deserve a lot of the Gold Gloves. He deserved half of them. because I went through a deep dive on this. If I can't believe I'm saying this, Cal Ripken was should have won a few of those.
Probably.
Well, he had
but he was actually a defensive compiler. Because if you can compile hits, you can compile defensive D-war, which he did. He compiled Alex, he compiled a lot of things, and Vizquel was an asset. I liked Omar Vizquel as a player. Actually, when the Jays picked him up at age 45, he was still an asset even at that advanced stage of his career. But
He was a light hit guy. He hit for a little average, but not very much, and there was absolutely no power. He was an okay, base runner, base stealer during kind of like the early and peak years of his career, but nothing superstar, obviously, as Alex said.
only received one MVP vote in his entire career.
Okay, that's another good point there. So
Only a 3-time All-Star, and he played over 20 years, and he had enough name with the Gold Gloves, like you would have thought at some point in time that would have carried over, and it just didn't. I think when you just look at the era, like when you talk about the Hall of Good or Hall of Very Good, like Omar Vizquel is one of those guys to me that you look at and you say, there are some good things there outside of the off the field stuff, just talking strictly statistics, but even statistically, there's just not enough meat on the bone that says that this guy has to be in the Hall of Fame, because
Not even close.
One-dimensional.
yeah, like he's like if you're talking about in basketball, he's like a 3-and-D guy, and that's his role. And he does the role very well, but that's it.
I don't think online it's really good to really be in that area, because if you're in that very good space, you're seen way, way worse by a lot of others, even worse than the actual people that are actually bad.
But at this point, so here's a question I want to ask all of you. If the domestic violence, I didn't really follow this because I really don't want to pay attention to this shit. Was he convicted, or was it just an accusation?
It's just like accusations. It's not confirmed. It's just
Okay, all right.
He's getting investigated.
Okay, so
accusation. He was never indicted or anything. It's not like a Roberto Alomar where there was stuff that was confirmed and the Jays removed him from their Ring of Honor. This is all accusations.
okay, all right. So if this doesn't come up, does Vizquel, would he have trended upwards? I mean, not in our group, obviously, but would he in the Hall of Fame voters to get there?
Well, he was doing better with private voters. He was at 52% in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And then the news came out, and then he dropped. And like, he suffered the worst drop in tracker history, and perhaps all of BWAA history.
Yeah.
I guess we'll know that shortly.
He could have got in on the 9th or 10th.
If it wouldn't have came out, honestly, I think he would have been a real tough one to predict, but I think he had already leveled out personally. I think the analytics people, again, the voters are getting younger. I really think he was going to go down. When you look at his OPS, out of the 30 guys on the ballot, he's out of the 20 hitters, he's last in tons of categories. They would have picked that apart. He wasn't.
Yeah, even when you look relative to his position, his numbers are still really soft and weak.
Right.
Not,
Like I said,
sometimes it's tricky.
hits.
Yeah, it's tricky comparing him to like corner outfielders or corner infielders or center field, where you look for more traditional power numbers to come from. But
Well, then speaking of soft and weak, A-Rod.
No,
wow.
threw that out there.
I'm from the area. I might have a few words to say about
I'm
it.
just jealous because of J-Lo. That's my jealousy talking. That's all that is.
You shouldn't be.
I am.
Why?
J-Lo? Come on.
I mean, if you want to have sex with her, just get engaged to her. How many times she been engaged? Like 350?
Well, I have a
There's children watching.
why I
Teaching
kind
them
of
life.
kept it to this sort of level, and it's also age appropriate for me. So I wanted to
I
also.
joke.
We're all legally allowed to drink. I mean,
Yeah.
God. Anyway, but okay, A-Rod though, he's someone I'm more fascinated with where he was going to fall than anyone else in my entire life watching this in his first year. I would have, if he would have went from 20, anywhere from 20 to 70, and I wouldn't have been surprised. Looks like he's probably going to be around 50.
Yeah.
A-Rod did get popped. A-Rod's unlikable.
Multiple times.
I think he's going to be about 30. 35.
35? Okay. All right. So A-Rod and I somehow got welcomed back in the baseball society through, because he's part of the whole Fox Baseball, I believe, for a few years now. I mean, somewhere
Sunday Night Baseball.
Sunday Night Baseball, yes. Somewhere Bonds, Palmero, they're all sort of like, they've got a support group thinking like, why is he let it back in and we're not? You all hated him more than us.
I think that his kind of A-Rod could be a dick, but then sometimes the way he comes across is much more like congenial or friendly, whereas Palmero was more standoff. Was more, I'm going to fuck you up unless your name is Jim Leland, then I will cower because I'm scared of you, Marlboro Man. But I think A-Rod, like, he's very photogenic, very well spoken, and kind of non-threatening in terms of the kind of commentator role that he has. So I could certainly see why he came back in. There's also more tabloid stuff with him, so bringing him into the fold gives you a little more attention, gets you a little more buzz.
Another reason too. I'm right here, New York.
Yeah.
And he was never really a jerk to the media or the writers.
Yeah, it's like
That's a good point, Al. He was more of a paparazzi victim in many ways.
I almost hate, like, always having to go for how people talk. Like, personally, I don't care how you are with the media. That doesn't matter to me. Like, more and more people are more standoffish towards the media because they don't want to deal with a lot of them.
But
it might not matter to you, but does it matter to the voters? Like, that's
it matters to them. I graduated with my BA, but it matters so much to them, but it's not about them. It's about the players they're voting for. But it almost feels like too often it's being about them. And listen, I have no issue with the idea of potentially getting a broadcaster with their own plaque. I don't mind that. But they also already have a separate, second tier award that they get, and they're upset with that. So it almost feels like in the eyes of others, they have an axe to grind. They take advantage
You
of
have a whole dedicated show for all this stuff. So
I'm just saying my thoughts on that. Like,
I know,
it can feel like it has.
Ted,
Yep.
I've got a question for Ted. What did Clemens and Bonds have their first go round? Because they're what, year 10 now, so this is the last.
They're
one.
on year 10, yeah. Yep. So they're
What did they
done
have?
at- So
I'm
this
trying to do a
year,
comparison of where they fell out compared to A-Rod.
oh, well, A-Rod's gonna gain. I predict that, not this year, but with Bonds, Clemens, Sosa, and probably Ortiz all coming off, I see a lot of votes to be had going forward. As I did a quote strategic ballot that I submitted to Kurt, and I left A-Rod off only because I wanted to get some of these other guys a vote and talk about them. And I knew A-Rod had a lot of time and room for growth. So I think you're going to see some increases there. Nothing's changed in terms of what he did, but you're gonna see a angle up there. Same with
How many
Manny.
years has A-Rod been on the ballot now?
This is first year for A-Rod, and you were
So if
asking.
he's around 30%, and I think weren't Clemens and Bonds, Vinny, Ted, somewhere around 35-ish percent.
I have right here. All four of them, Schilling, Clemens, Baum, and Sosa, all came in 2013. Schilling got 38.8, Clemens got 37.6, Bonds got 36.2, and Sosa got 12.5.
So you're saying, what that's saying to me is the voters in A-Rod's first year, potentially, if we're thinking he's going to end up somewhere around 30%, they associate him much more closely with Schilling, Bonds, and Clemens specifically, if we're talking about the PED stuff with the last two. And they've clearly differentiated him significantly from Sosa. I think a point like that would potentially suggest, as you said, Ted, as other guys fall off the ballot, like he might get to 50% over the next couple of years and then kind of hover there. But as you get to like year 9 and 10, he does enough good work in the media. I could see him getting in that 10-year window. I really could.
It may depend on what some of the other guys do after their 10 years is up. Do they do something on a era committee ballot that then, okay, we're gonna start accepting these guys? The thing about A-Rod is that, does anybody feel like he owned his violations more than the other guys? He sat there, did a media conference, said, yep, I'm going to be out for a year. Yep, I made mistakes. Whereas you have these other guys being a little bit more sketchy and I didn't do it. You never tested me positive. Is that an element that the media is going to say?
Yes.
Well, at least
Yes.
you took that in.
Yeah, they
That's a
love
big-
media and the society as a whole loves to tear people down to build.
Yeah, I know that. It's so clicky. It really is very, very clicky.
Well, it's not even about clicky. It's about that's society as a whole. That's outside of media. Like we love to tear people down, and then when we're ready, we say, "Hey, we're going to build them back up again." Like you think about crap that happened with Tiger Woods. I used that example a couple of years ago. All of a sudden, he's in contention for the Masters, and man, the whole sporting world stopped. Like this is the greatest thing ever. It's like Jack in '86 at the Masters, and build.
The number one thing that sells TV is conflict.
That's right.
And so media will create conflict because that sells ratings, that period.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, it definitely does. Like I can say that firsthand.
They love that dirty laundry.
Kick them when they're up, kick them when they're down.
It's always like, and as a result, this is a
Land
big
down
reason
under.
as to why Ramirez, by comparison,
Let's bring them up.
yeah, we might as well. We're mentioning A-Rod. We might as well here.
I think it's funny. It was funny. He was in. Have you seen Screwball with the doctor that prescribed them all the PEDs, Anthony Botch, who ran like a clinic in a Miami tanning salon as a doctor, and he was prescribing just to prescribe all these people testosterone and all these other PEDs, and he had a lot of clients that were major league players. One of them, of course, Alex Rodriguez was the most famous one, but he had many clients, including Manny Ramirez, which was actually one of his first ones. And he had some funny stories, like they got really close, like so close that there was times Manny Ramirez couldn't sleep, so Bosch had to read him bedtime stories to cool him down. And when in 2009, of course, that was when he first tested positive with the Dodgers. He made the excuse that saying, "Oh, it was an erectile dysfunction medication. You know, I wasn't supposed to take this during game day." He was using that excuse, and I just think that's funny. The whole story of him and Bosch is funny.
Well, I guess the question about Manny is why, like, again, maybe it's a similar thing to Sosa, is he was a media darling until he wasn't, and everybody kind of like pile on him and tear him down. But, you know, Manny is probably one of the, 5 or so greatest right-handed hitters in the history of baseball. We look at a combination of average and power.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. I'm
could
trying to
you?
remember what he did with, and I wish Evan was here for this. Didn't Ramirez accost one of the traveling secretaries
I don't remember, honestly.
like late in his Red Sox tenure, which I think really turned a lot of the media against him? I mean, I guess it sort of goes back to, like, I guess we can say, like, Manny's being Manny as long as he's getting you hits.
Well, and I think, like, you look at Manny, though, and I think when you talk about when things really changed for Boston is when he signed there back, what was it? It was like 2001. He got the 8-year, I think it was $160 million contract. A lot of people even at the time were like, whoa, this guy's good, but is he that good? And like,
Yeah, it was 7 years, 119 million.
is that what it was? Okay.
No, the Indians offered him that, and then the Red Sox got an 8-year, $160 million deal.
See, Jeff still remembers his shit. I haven't forgotten everything.
How do you look up these things so fast?
But as you think about, if you think about Manny, like, he was the dude. Because the Red Sox already had Pedro, and they were getting to a point, but they weren't that level. Like, when Manny came in, he was that dude. When I think about those Red Sox teams, and especially the ones that ultimately won the World Series, I think about Manny first and foremost. And I think that's for a good reason. Like, this is a World Series MVP. This is a guy that was a premier hitter for an extended period of time in his career, both average and power. You know, he was clearly one of the best. And I just, as I see some of these other guys, like, was he quite as good as A-Rod? No. But A-Rod statistically is one of the truly all-time greats when you look at the numbers. But Manny's not that far down. I mean,
Also, Manny's got a better playoff. record.
Greats of his time.
oh, easily.
Yeah.
Easily.
And
Yeah.
we don't talk enough about that. You know, I baseball is, to me, the one sport or the one out of the big four Hall of Fames where playoff accomplishments seem to matter the least. And maybe it's a bit, I'm going to quote Bill Simmons, where he says baseball is an individual sport trapped in a team sport. And maybe there's something to that, but Manny Ramirez, and for me, he gets my vote, even though I did mention that line of demarcation for me. I can't consciously say Ortiz should be in and not Manny Ramirez. Those Red Sox teams don't happen without those two. And you've got Ramirez over Ortiz. I'd have Ortiz over Ramirez in terms of their importance at that time. Either way, we're looking at 1A, 1B for us both, right? So
I'm gonna say it should have been, if Nomar stayed healthy, that would have been an amazing trio of Ortiz,
That's true,
Ramirez, and Nomar.
Yep.
And then the injuries killed his career, and the media killed his reputation.
Talk about Nomar. Well, that
But at least he married Mia Hamm.
No, I'm
No.
talking about, like, you know, usually I don't want to try to push my own thing. I'm just saying, like, when it comes to people that are injured, they're seen as, oh, their chance is done, it's kaput, all that other stuff. I'm
but he
not
also
saying
got
for
traded to
Nomar.
the Cubs in 2004. What really hurt Nomar, if we really want to be honest, is when he got traded as part of that big deal to the Cubs in 2004, and the Cubs ultimately missed the playoffs when that was the year they had brought in Maddox, and this was going to be the team that won it all. And the Red Sox changed the makeup of their team, got rid of Nomar, and went on and finally ended the curse of the Bambino. Like, you talk about Nomar, like that was, I think, the first really kind of dent in the armor. Was as soon as he was traded away, the Red Sox kind of went to another level and got to a place where they hadn't gotten all those years with him being one of the key guys.
Yeah, I'm just saying in general, when it comes to people that are injured, like a Nomar, for instance, it feels like those people oftentimes get like put down even harder, almost like.
Well, we had Tony Oliva, who just got in by the Golden A's era committee. Great hitter, like an Omar, 300 hitter until the injury struck. And
Yeah.
he just got in. So never say never for Omar. He's going to.
Yeah, who knows? I just think of David Wright. that's why.
But if you look at Manny's numbers in the playoffs in 2004 and 2007 specifically, those first two kind of Red Sox championships of that era, like those numbers are damn impressive. Like he was World Series MVP in 2004. I think he hit over 400. 2007, I remember he was big in the divisional round, and the NLCS wasn't quite as big in the Colorado World Series, but you know, in general, his overall playoff numbers in the times that it mattered most for that team, like they were huge. And I just breaks my heart to see that he can't even break 30%.
Oh, and me too. It's like if A-Rod is often seen in the same company as him because they both got popped twice. If you're going to give A-Rod 30% in his first ballot, why wasn't Manny given that? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, it really doesn't.
Another great Manny story is, you know, after he went to the MLB, he spent some time in China and Japan. I think it was his time in Japan. It has one of the best home run calls ever. He hits a home run. I don't know for what MPB team, and the best home run call I ever heard, the guy says, "So long goes the ex-girlfriend." And I just start laughing. I say, "This is the home run call I've ever heard."
So long goes the ex-girlfriend.
So long goes the ex-girlfriend. It was done like that. And no, it was not China. It was Taiwan.
Taiwan.
What do you John Cena here?
Yeah, just want to say Taiwan is not part of China.
Oh, okay, well,
Utilizing Mandarin in most time.
I would say, yeah, Manny Ramirez is a definite yes for me, if not for the PEDs. As I said earlier, I left him off of that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I just keep coming back to that whole integrity thing. And I think it just speaks to the larger problem with it's got a dated philosophy and approach. It's an old game. That's why it continues to lose viewership and popularity. And when I look at the integrity clause, like you can go throughout the history of baseball and so many of those guys in the Hall of Fame, and you look at them and they say they absolutely do not hold up to the standard, both in terms of their play on the field and the way they played off the field.
all right. So you're bringing up a good point here in terms of, and Evan and I talk about this all the time. right now we're in an era where the best baseball player that maybe any of us have ever seen is Mike Trout. And a lot of people under the age of 30 couldn't pick him out of a police lineup.
That's Rob Manfred for you. That's
Yeah.
real good work. Like this quality stuff. Can find Ken Rosenthal, but can't market his players worth of crap. Like at least Bud Selig, for all of his incompetence, he was like, hey, we'll do interleague play. Hey, we'll do wild card. These are low-hanging fruits, but I finally did them. And he actually knew how to market his players.
Mhm.
Like, so, but again, I bring up the Bud Selig name. Once he's in, that should be, and I understand where you're coming from, Dave. Like if you're trying to hold to that standard, but I think once Bud Selig gets in, like that standard's got to go. You can't let the guy that was the sheriff that oversaw the entire era that we're keeping all these players out in. Like, he just sets that to me is another example of the hypocrisy of the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Then they'll say that, oh, the Veterans Committee put him in, not us.
Doesn't matter. It's still the same Hall of Fame.
Exactly.
It's a
That's the
process.
thing. It doesn't matter. The public are still going to see them as one of the same.
Well, here's something else I find really interesting about this. Thankfully, the Veterans Committee's put in some players, so we're not going to have an empty ceremony this year.
Thank God.
But and Alec, this might be more up your alley because based on your current Twitter handle, but Scott Rowland is trending really high. And with all due respect to Scott Rowland, I like Scott Rowland, but Rowland could be the only person voted in if the other numbers go down, which I suspect they will, out of a group of, and it's talking about Hall of Fame, because the keyword also too is fame. Rowland is not at the same level of all these guys he could beat out. Clemens, Bonds, even Schilling, A-Rod. Scott Rowland could be the only guy. You're big on Scott Rowland. Tell me why.
Well, he was one of my favorite Blue Jays growing up, and I always loved the way he fielded. I just loved the way he was one of the best fielders I saw, whether it be St. Louis, Toronto, later on with the Reds. And I just love that stance he had. I just love the stance he had. And I looked at it. I'm looking at this, people are saying, oh, one-dimensional defense. No, the guy really had a solid bat. He had 2,000 hits. He had 300 plus home runs. He had 500 doubles. He had like 4 or 500 RBI seasons. He had like 3 or 4 40 double seasons. Only had a season where he nearly hit 50 doubles. He had a solid bat as a third baseman. And he stole 100 plus bases. The only players with I can think of that have 300 home runs and 100 stolen bases are in the Hall of Fame too. George Brett, Wade Boggs. Well, Adrian Beltre is going to get into the Hall of Fame eventually. I mean, George Brett, Chipper Jones, Adrian Beltre, and then Scott Rowland. Those are the guys that I think of that have 2,000 hits, 300 home runs, and then 100 plus stolen bases.
That's right. And I think if you look at Scott Rowland, like respectfully, you think about greatest ever at their position. Like when you start stack ranking some of the third basemen, like obviously Alec brought up a few names of guys that are either in the Hall of Fame or a guy like Beltre who's going to be. You probably could put Scott Rowland in that top 10-ish range of the position of all time. And you think about 100 and almost 50 years of Major League Baseball and being able to say that a guy was one of the 10 best to ever do it. Like I get your point, Kirk, about the fame piece, but not every Hall of Famer has a tremendous amount of fame associated with them. But when I look at Scott Rowland, I'm saying relative to his position, he's probably, in terms of guys that are eligible for the ballot right now, like he is the absolute best at his position that is not in the Hall of Fame. And he's one of the 10 best ever at the position in terms of his total body of work.
Yeah, that's kind of where I went with it. I had not been voting until this year, until I broke down some of the stats, like you said, Jeff, and start looking at, if you start to put together best third baseman of all time, it's hard to leave them out unless you count guys that played third base for a couple of years or that. And of course, as Alec made great points about his defense. And I think third base is one of the most underrepresented positions if you go through. So between those, I said, you know what? He was really good. he accumulated a lot of stats. He hits like 6 or 7 all-star appearances, which is another, all-star game is kind of hokey because there's a vote and there's all this crap. But over a career, if you take a guy like Bobby Abreu that made like 1 versus a guy like Roland that made like 7, even though Abreu up and down has better numbers, I tend to go to a guy like Roland that was one of the best in his position and got those stats, and it's another representative position.
Yeah, Dave, I think I look at it though, and there's positional value. When we talk about Abreu as an outfielder, like there's a lot more similarity with other guys at that position. Like you look at that position a little bit more offensively.
Which is why he didn't make all-star games, because there's already
That's right.
8 other guys, in that league that are better than him.
Where if you're talking about Scott Rowland being a 6 or 7-time All-Star, you could talk about fan vote and everything else. But the reality is he was still getting those votes for a reason, because he was viewed, kind of across the board as unanimously one of the very best at his position, where Abreu wasn't. And, when you look at him, I compare Scott Rowland to like, he's maybe a small step above Ron Santo.
Yeah.
You look at the overall
Good comp.
Like that would be the comp. He's not Brooks Robinson level, he's not Michael Jack Schmidt level, but probably Ron Santo level or slightly above. And just because the voters made a mistake in the past and kept Ron Santo out until he was dead because they were morons, doesn't mean that Scott Rowland should have to wait 30, 40 years to get his call into the Hall.
Yeah.
What are people
Not-
thinking about Todd Helton?
Todd Helton, I can tell you this firsthand. I have been following this guy for the last few years, who's a big Helton guy for the Hall of Fame. And
Yeah,
as I said
know that
last
guy.
year,
Guy too.
what
I think he was a big Walker guy too.
he was more so, he was even bigger with Helton. He loved Walker, but he especially loved Helton. And he was like one of the main people that I even said on here that outside of like the main guys on here, if there's one other person other than the people associated with, the controversies, it would probably be Todd Helton, because of his high averages, his high slugging percentage, and how it was comparable to people that are already in. I have an old picture of myself that compares to like, I think it was like, Cal Ripken. Another comparison was, and I think another one was to, the numbers escape me, but I definitely knew that, with the high average, as well as, his numbers being also very comparable on the road to how it is in Coors Field, that was another reason too. And I think, like, if I recall, like Joey Votto has very similar stats to him, and it was like in a whole league company. I don't remember the exact post on the top of my head, but I do know it was very, very high for Helton.
Did you say
Similarity
Helton's
scores-
numbers home and away, that his numbers were almost similar? Because that's just fundamentally not true.
Again, the
No, but
numbers
even
are
if-
mistaking
One of the
my
best
head.
if you
So
back it out-
baseman of all time.
Yeah.
No, I'm just trying to make sure I clarified that I understood what Vinny was saying, because we're using that as a premise. Let's make sure the premise is correct, because the premise is flawed. If we're saying,
yeah, that is an issue for me, and you were right. Like, and the picture is like, in the back of my head. I don't have it in front of me, but I do know that I remember last time I was very big with Helton with the numbers in front of me. I don't have the numbers in front of me. That's a big reason why I was a little bit off.
yeah, and that's
The
what I'm trying to
similarity
understand. Like,
scores
Go ahead.
are for batters: Jeff Bagwell, Edgar Martinez, Vlad Guerrero, Orlando Cepeda, Larry Walker, Jim Rice, Frank Thomas, and a few fringe Hall of Famers like Fred McGriff. So, I mean, he's gonna be in a lock in a couple years.
Well, I think
Yeah.
that's including the numbers that come from Coors Field at a time where balls were flying out of Coors Field, right? Fair to say, especially.
Yeah, but I think you can still back out I forget what it's called, the ballpark effect, just like ERA plus. They have that for hitters, and you back it out, and he's I would think he still is going to put up close enough numbers where he's Hall worthy.
Well, I think if you look at his away numbers, like we can look at his home and away number. At home, he hit 345, and on the road, he hit like 285 or 287. His power differential is quite a bit noticeable in terms of home and away. So to your point, I know there's a metric where you're talking about, it's like something plus, where it factors all that in, where you're trying to measure like hitter's park versus pitcher's park. But if you look at him, like, how different would he be if he didn't play the majority of his career at Coors Field?
But we don't know that.
I mean, we
We
he
don't.
didn't
He
play
played his
very-
entire career with the Rockies, and one could also say
It's one of the stadiums.
I mean, I'm the kind of person that knows that in the same way that I don't think it's fair to really, praise someone just because they're from New York or whatever. In the same sense, he was drafted, but he was been with the Rockies his entire career. Like with me, it's like that's just the place where it is. Like I'm not really the one that really wants to punish someone because they played their career. I mean, people always talk about the hitting. Do people also need to understand that playing a mile high above sea level is also can take a lot of damage to your lungs. It's also something that a little bit harder to breathe. It's also something that's, a bit harder to move around almost like in a higher altitude. What can say about playing, it also takes a bit of a different toll on your body. So you can kind of go both ways. While it may help you in terms of hitting, at the same time, if it was really that much of an effect, how come the Rockies have never even won a division title, let alone a World Series?
Listen to this real quick. One quick stat: OPS for Helton away 855. OPS for Scott Rowland, who we just talked about, 855. So
One played third base and one played first base, though. And
right, exactly.
Like there's a difference.
But if you're breaking down just pure hitting, same difference. So,
Look at
the positional
Like I said
value.
earlier, he UZR, a total run save. He's a top 5 when it comes to run save at first baseman, and he's probably one of the best first basemen of all time going by metrics. And I know he only won I know gold, like you said about what you said, even though he won only three gold gloves, like what you said, even though JT Snow of the San Francisco Giants, who never wasn't really that good of a defender to begin with, kept winning all those gold gloves, even though Helton was clearly the better defender.
JT Snow sounds like a player who should have been on the 86 Mets.
wasn't.
Thank you.
I have his achievements right here. He was the on-base percentage leader in 2000, 05, and 07. And he's also the only player in MLB history to have 100+ extra base hits in consecutive seasons. The only ones to do it twice in their careers were Lou Gehrig and Chuck Klein.
All right, let's move on to another one because we're not doing this for 2 hours, or we probably are. But Andrew Jones, I love this guy. She's shooting right up.
One of the greatest defenders of all time. Willie Mays said he's better than him.
He could hit.
From a Dutch colony.
Because that matters.
Yeah,
I don't know. I just find it. I'm all about my geography. I'm all about my history.
Viva la Orange.
Get that out.
Wasn't he like a 255 or 254 career hitter or something like that? Like I'm trying to wait. Like I know he was over 400 home runs or whatever. Yeah, 254. I'm sorry, I was waiting for it to come up. So
yeah,
to your point, one of the best defensive center fielders of all time, but at a less important position than, let's say, shortstop or second base or even first base, catcher. But he was, pretty much a swing for the fences. I'm either going to hit a home run or I'm not doing much else kind of guy. Like if you look at the career numbers, like how do we?
I would also say like this: there's people that are in that have great offense but not that great defense. Why not the other way around?
I'm not a fan of dimensional.
And his offense was great. I mean,
I don't think.
No, I'm not saying that he wasn't good at hitting. I'm just saying in general, why not have guys that are more emphasis on the defensive side as opposed to just the offensive side? Because I feel like so many people just look at the bats, but I say, hey, don't forget the glove too. That's the other side of the game.
I kind of went that way. I had been not voting for him until this year, and I finally just listened to some of the defensive arguments combined with he, did have some silver slugger, some really pound them, ground them out. Yep, swing for the fences.
51 home runs in 2005.
Yeah, that was he had outstanding seasons. What always bothered me was the 254 batting average and just the complete tail off at age 30, just where he just became almost not startable. And I've kind of come around to where I'm looking at, I'm willing to not take career guys that played 25 years and got all these cumulative stats, but rather look at a guy that was really good. I think for about 5 to 6 to 7 years, he was one of the top 2 or 3 outfielders in the National League hitting, and then the defense is a bonus. He's at the very end of my list, but I had him slight in.
I like what you bring up though, Dave, about the fact of when you look at Andrew Jones, you're probably looking from like 96 when I think he came up as a rookie. What was he, like 19 or 20, some young kid that debuted?
Maybe if his birth certificate was accurate.
Yeah, if that's always a big if. But I
Right.
know he came up in the tail end of that run, and that was the Braves team that lost to the Yankees in 96 in the series. Before you were even born, Vinny, my goodness, I'm an old man too. So I just tried to think through, but realistically, to your point, you really only have like 11-ish seasons, maybe from like the tail end of 96 to 2006 or 7, if I remember correctly. Like, so you only have like a decade plus, and if you only have like that decade or slightly more, like, was he so spectacular at his position where the accumulation doesn't matter as much? Like if Mike
Billy
Trout,
Mays said he was a
And I'm
better
close on
defender
that.
than him.
No, I'm
Defensively,
saying- yeah, defensively, you're right. He was. I'm just trying to think like if Mike Trout played a decade and then never played again, he's in no doubt about it first ballot Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Everybody can agree
good
with,
point.
because even if he didn't have all the accumulation, he was so spectacular at what he did in all facets. And maybe Mike Trout's a unique case. But do we view Andrew Jones as somebody that was so spectacular in that decade that it makes him a Hall of Fame?
That's why I was on the fence, and I'm right there. I don't know.
You're gonna, if you're so up, well, I don't think batting average is the end all be all when it comes to and I always hate it when people bring up batting average. Like there's been so many great hitters throughout the year. If you think Andrew Jones is batting average bad, wait until you look at a 500 home run club member and Hall of Famer Harmon Killebrew's batting average. You're gonna flip when you see that.
Yeah, but he also
Well, 500 home
70
runs.
something. Yeah, he also hit 570 something home runs. So there's a little bit of a distinction there. He hit a key milestone in a much different era.
Much harder era too.
Much harder era. So I think like when I look at a guy like Andrew Jones, that's what I'm trying to balance out is how good was he really for that 10 or 11 seasons? To your point about batting average, I agree it's not the be all end all. I also like the younger thought process and the analytics folks that always say on base percentage. That also depends on perspective. I hate when somebody says, well, their on base percentage was great. I'm sorry, but if I've got a guy hitting 3, 4, or 5 in my damn lineup, I don't want him walking. I want a contact to damage ratio. Like you're going to drive in some damn runs. You don't do that. Like Frank Thomas, I remember used to for a lot of times, like he'd take walks in key situations. Hall of Famer. Yes. But you know, you should be driving home runs, not getting on so somebody else can drive you.
But yeah, he was a decent base stealer. He had some 20 home runs and 20 stolen bases seasons.
Well, I'm talking about though, is that when you're talking about like an Andrew Jones, if he was hitting in the middle of the lineup, I'm just saying if we were talking about batting average is not the be all end all, I can agree with that. Like it's a concern, but I don't want to see like an on base percentage being popped up for other people saying, well, this is so great. No, it's not. If they're hitting in the middle of the lineup and they're walking all the time, it's kind of cowardly baseball. Anyways,
Not necessarily. I don't think it was cowardly. I mean, it's strategic, right?
no, not necessarily. If you've got two guys on, either way, I think Dave, like, I'm with you. Like, he's not a guy that I pound the table for, but if he got in within the 10 years, am I going to sit there and pitch a fit about it? No, because I could see the argument. Power hitter. So in an era where power hitting mattered, he had power and he was phenomenal with the glove, one of the best ever at his position. Like, feels right.
I think also too, we're now looking at defense a lot more strategically than we ever did before. So
Good.
many great defensive players in the past got by on a reputation. Arguably, I'll say this: another Hall of Famer just got in, Jim Cott, who had no business winning 17 Gold Gloves. Like he didn't, especially in the last few years, like when he was only pitching like 60 innings. Like, come
But
on.
but it was a representation of the fact that at one of the elements of his position for an extended period of time, he was.
But I mean, yeah, but I guess I'm going on too much.
But I get you with the whole point about like the Gold Gloves, like that can be tricky.
And like I said about JT Snow snubbing all those Gold Gloves from Todd Helden.
Yeah, and I think there's an eyeball
I thought
test.
Snow
We
was
were
one
able
of
to
the great
see
ones.
Andrew Jones.
Yeah.
We were able to see Andrew Jones play.
Yeah.
We could see that he was a premier player at his position defensively.
Mhm.
We don't need a metric or anything else, a Gold Glove to validate that. We saw that. We know that. We experienced it.
So just in the interest of time, so we'll move on to Gary Sheffield. I always like this guy, but I think unlike Andrew Jones, he's the victim of, he's got a journeyman resume going from team to team to team to team. He's like Fred McGriff to me in many ways. He's got the numbers. He's also then, like to your point too, Jeff, also a victim of his position somewhat in terms of his offense. I mean, his offense was fantastic, but when you think of Gary Sheffield, if Gary Sheffield were to get into the Hall of Fame, how many teams would say, hey, where my hat? You know, and I don't even know, what team do you think of Gary Sheffield with?
I usually
Marlins.
think him Marlins. I would go with the Marlins personally,
He only
because
Braves, I think of him with the Braves. Yankees.
He falls victim to the fact that he started his career in Milwaukee, then he worked his way out of Milwaukee, then he was a couple of years in San Diego, then he worked his way out of San Diego, then he was in Florida for a few years. He was part of that 97 team that Huizenga
they
then
blew up. They blew up. They sold him to the Dodgers.
But basically what I'm saying is that I think sometimes with Sheffield, he falls a little bit of the victim of some of these smaller market, lower media profile teams that he was a part of for the first probably half of his career. Later on, probably got more love and attention when he was with the Dodgers and when he was with the Yankees. I think certainly his all-star game appearances kind of validate that at least a little bit.
Hall of Fame stance when it comes to his swing. Hall of Fame swing, I'll say that much. Always loved his stance.
Well, but I think like you look at Sheffield and you say he was a good power hitter, but at a time where you had all-time power hitters, he certainly wasn't that. He was a good average hitter, like a very good average hitter, but he wasn't necessarily elite at that.
Another thing is that I know defense does not matter, but he was to the point where he was just so bad at defense, people were kind of writing him off. Like, he's one of the worst rated defensive players in history. And I think when it comes, and I know defense doesn't matter when you're such a good hitter, but it gets to, there's that point where you're such, especially when you're in a national league, because he was in the national, he was such a poor defender and he was playing for all these national league teams, and he did not get the chance to be a designated hitter for most of his career. And I think that really hurt him.
And I think even when you look at the 97 Marlins, I don't think you really think about Gary Sheffield. I don't think he was ever had a great reputation of performance in the playoffs.
Yeah, then that's, I think, the thing with Sheffield, nothing stands out.
Almost like the offensive Mussina in some ways.
Yeah,
In a way, he is one.
even when you look at sort of the negative things, I mean, yeah, he had sort of the association with Bonds too, which doesn't do him any favors. But he's not even like, and he wasn't great with the press either. So he's not even the head asshole.
Yeah, and like
Didn't he get like, wasn't there a bleacher, and when he was with the Brewers, didn't he have like a bench incident?
Yeah, Chris, you were going to say something about Sheffield?
Yeah, so obviously, I grew up watching him. He came up 88, 89 as a 19-year-old kid. He was kind of force-fed into the team as a young kid. They didn't really have anybody playing top-notch at that time, and he kind of came in with the teenage attitude that he was better than everybody, and didn't really get a chance to prove it here. As Jeff said, he kind of forced his way out of Milwaukee to San Diego and then on to Florida, where he had probably his most notable success with the World Series there. But he was just seen as kind of like a troublemaker with the team to start with. Didn't want to cooperate, didn't want to be a good teammate, and he did put up the numbers. He was associated with Bonds with getting the clear and and the cream from the same guys that Bonds was. So I think he's got just a lot of baggage that's really going to hold him back as far as votes go. You know, he
What do
does
you
have
think
a
about it?
magic 500, but I think that's really only thing he can really hang his hat on.
Yeah, and Chris, I was going to ask you, since being, you know, from around that area and watch him at the beginning of his career in Milwaukee, and then obviously following him throughout his career, like sometimes to me, I don't know if I call it like a piss test or a smell test, but sometimes when you see like a Hall of Famer, you just know it. You know what I mean? Like Randy Johnson, for example, needs to tell you he's a Hall of Famer. You just know. That's just one example. Greg Maddux, I go on and on. But when you look at Gary Sheffield, like, does he feel like he was that level of a Manny or even a Sosa, let alone a Bonds or somebody like that? Does he feel like he was a Hall of Fame player within his time?
No, not at all. And I really wanted him to be one when he was drafted. You know, a lot of excitement coming in. I still got a ball somewhere that he flipped to me in the stands. So,
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
but yeah, no, he compiled 500 home runs, and that's really the best way to put it with him. You know, he compiled numbers. He stuck around long enough to have a good career, but never, you know, really watching him did I think he would be a Hall of Famer in the end. Maybe you will. Maybe they'll soften on him. You know, they'll grant him his pass, but no, he never really stood out as being one of the guys you kind of expected to be voted in at the end of the career.
You feel like he's underrated and a victim of circumstance in some cases, be some of his own doing, but some of just like the team.
Well, he had kind of had that. I think he had that thing because, I'm better than everybody because, his uncle was a star at the time pitcher for the Mets, Dwight Gooden.
Heard of him.
And I think that because he had that, he was connected, he thought, oh, he had this kind of past that, he was that, like, you had the respect, you had the liking because he was related to someone who just had one of the best pitching seasons in recent history.
Yeah, I look at him and I would even say, like, just to be kind of here, but if he was doing steroids, he didn't even do them well. His power numbers, I'm sorry, like, at least you could say with Bonds and Sosa and Manny's and Ortiz's, you can look at upticks in numbers or whatever, and you could say, man, he did that really well. But it's almost like, did he get, to your point, did he get like a second-rate thing? Did he get second-rate steroids? Because I don't think you saw his numbers tick up that much in like the second half of his career. Like as he's become a bigger thing.
Yeah, you're right, Jeff. Like I've also noticed that too. Like
he had a
I've noticed
season where he hit 25 home runs and 22 stolen bases at 38 years old in 2007.
Wow. Yeah, but we're not. I think with Sheffield, maybe just to put a bow on that too. And I just want to see if people agree with me on this one. Unlike Ramirez, or some of the other people that we've talked about, Sosa, who like in these power hitter categories, Sheffield was that guy. If you're the GM or the fan base, it's like, okay, we got this guy, but you're always looking over your shoulder because you think you can upgrade, and you could.
I mean, you could, but I would also say with Sheffield, I would say yes, he was kind of picked. He was in his own circumstance. And I think also with Sheffield, because like, even though he may be lumped in a sense with, the Bonds and the Clemens and whatever, it always feels like he's his own kind of guy almost. Like it always feels like, yeah, he may be linked with them potentially, but I kind of see people that are not as big with the steroids be a bit more leaning for him because of the lack of an uptick. I just kind of noticed that myself.
Was he ever really the unquestioned dude of any of the teams he was on? Because even when you go back to those Marlins teams in '97, I think about Kevin Brown first. I know it's a different, pitcher versus position player, but was he ever like the dude on any team? And like, does that?
No, but at the same time,
yes, 92 Padres. He was.
So we're going back to like when he was 22 years old. To your point.
Yeah, but he was. I mean, 48.
If that's the 98 Padres, you mean?
92 Padres. I know he was the guy
after Milwaukee.
Oh, okay. 330 average, 33 home runs. He killed it. I'm a little higher on Sheffield, but for sake of time,
I think he's one of those.
But Tony Gwynn was the guy.
Sorry to interrupt you guys, but I think he's someone who would have been benefited way better if he was a DH for most of his career.
Yeah, but then then you work in that other problem because like DHs, how long did it take Edgar Martinez and Ortiz is a special player. But anyway, moving on. Jeff Kent.
It's like other than Dan
Well, there's just better
Shaughnessy,
second basemen out there.
other
there's
than like
better
Dan
second basemen
Shaughnessy,
out there.
who's really gonna go pound the table for a guy like him and put him as the only producers on their ballot? I
He
mean,
stood
yeah,
up
he has
to
the most amount of-
Bonds.
Yeah, that's the thing.
My
When it,
theory is that he gets so much Hall of Fame support because he stood up to Bonds.
I would say, Alec, that you want to talk about character and whatnot. It's not like Jeff Kent was exactly the warmest teddy bear on the bed. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like he was kind of a rough personality, and again, with a similar sense to Schilling, he kind of is the more anti-LGBT kind of side. But I don't really care about that aspect. But it's really hard for me to really go with someone like a Jeff Kent when there's other people that are, Bonds is on the ballot, but
He's
there is
another
a whole
guy.
bunch.
Giants fan?
He's another guy who I know, like I said, he's another guy like Sheffield that played a position that was known for being well reputed for defense and was just flat out horrible at it. Second baseman.
Yeah.
He also stole an MVP. He had no business winning
Yeah.
that.
Todd Helton should have won in 2000.
But all right, so
That's what I was
Were you
gonna.
trying to say something,
Sure.
Jeff, about Jeff Kent?
Yeah, I was gonna ask Kurt. You're a Giants fan, aren't you?
no, I'm not. I just happen to have a shit ton of jerseys. I'm a Jays fan.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
go
I'm just
Jays.
trying to think here, like when you talk about Jeff Kent, I think he had a few all-star appearances. I know he won the one MVP, the disputed MVP, but MVP nonetheless. Like it goes in his column at the end of the day. It's
It
just-
does, but he's also like I'm not like Jeff Kent as a player, as a person, not as much. But I don't think so. Maybe a disputed MVP. He's more known for being on Survivor than he is for anything on baseball. That's not a Hall of Fame guy to me.
Yeah, if you look
Watch his
at
cars.
numbers, like I think
Good.
Alec brought up the point of like he was really bad defensively at a position that's more known for it. It's similar like to a Piazza. But Piazza was like a whole nother level, is the perception of him as a hitter at his position, even though he wasn't worth anything defensively. I'm not sure that Jeff Kent was that level of hitter. And Jeff Kent, you could certainly argue like his absolute best peak years for the most part happened because he got a lot of protection from Barry Bonds in the lineup.
Absolutely. I mean, you could.
Then you had protection in Houston, protection with Bagwell and Biggio.
All right. So
Great capitalizer of circumstance.
okay. So
Yeah.
now here's the one I'm vocal against because I hate the guy, but
Sir
not special to me at all. Billy Wagner.
William Wagner.
Huh?
I'm saying that just to make you mad.
Yeah.
I'm gonna-
I don't know what that means, but okay.
Yeah.
Your trash is Ted's treasure.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm not, you know what, though? I can make the argument all day long, but people either like them or they don't. And
Let me hear the argument.
I'll
Ted.
be honest, though, I'm getting a little tired and debating it.
I just want to hear the argument because I'm not saying I'm-
Honestly, second best relief pitcher of all time after Rivera. I mean, period.
Eckersley.
Well, again, let me talk, Alex.
Floor is
So-
yours.
All right. So the issue against him is poor postseason, but again, you're looking at somebody with very minimal innings pitched. And so if I go and do one thing very small amount of times and I don't do well at it, you're looked down upon. So your number you're in is too low to judge that. But I can see the argument against it, where Rivera dominated in the postseason. That's the difference. And Rivera is by far the better player. But when you look at ERA plus, which takes into consideration your ERA and your ballpark that you pitched in comparison to the rest of the league at that time, standard deviation number one is Rivera. Standard deviation in his own category is Wagner, and then it's everybody else in the history of baseball. Everybody else. Your favorite baseball pitcher is below those two guys. And then again, you can look at all the other numbers, saves and whatnot. the guy also retired while his ERA was like a 1 point something in his last year. He was still producing, but he decided to go spend his time with his family. And I really think a lot of him, because he didn't just kind of fade away. He just left while he was still at his peak.
I
And
think I'll pile on to some of those stats. So he's 6th all-time career saves, 6th. Nobody's going to come close to him in a while. That's more than Eckersley, Suter, Fingers, and Gossage. He has lower ERA than all
Different
those
eras.
guys, a better K per 9 than all those guys, 7 All-Star game appearances, so he's right there with them. And so, yeah, postseason aside, I look at postseason in general as you can put cherries on top, but that's not going to make me go down. Like if there's somebody like a Schilling, you have this postseason, okay, I'll move him up a little bit. No, I'm not going to move a guy down. And so if you're going to, I'm not a big relief pitcher in the Hall of Fame guy, actually. I think it's probably getting a little loose. You look at a guy like Lee Smith and some of those guys, Wagner's got to be in.
I think you bring up, like, as I'm trying to weigh it, like, I think his strikeouts per 9 innings was almost 12. It was like 11.8 or 11.
It's 11.9. It's the highest ever.
11.9. So it's the highest ever. His whip, I believe, is under 1.0. Like,
Yes, it is.
Even as a relief pitcher, it's just phenomenal. When you look at dominance from a sustained period of time, the 7-time All-Stars kind of reflects that. Yeah, postseasons were boo-boo, but to your point, Ted, while they were total and complete boo-boo, and we can't pretend they weren't, like, how many appearances did he even have? Like you said, as a relief pitcher, you're getting a smaller sample size.
Yeah, the 11.2 innings pitched.
So yeah,
Yeah,
one
so
or two bad
limited-
appearances.
Good amount of appearances in the playoffs. So it matters, but it probably only matters to if he had great numbers in the playoffs. We're not even having a debate or discussion. Duh, of course, Billy Wagner goes in. He's the second best reliever of all time behind Rivera.
Well, okay, Dave saw you would have seen him play probably more than all of us put together. Did he feel like a Hall of Famer to you?
He's definitely the best reliever in Astros history, and there's been some good ones. So I don't know what a reliever Hall of Fame looks like. I know what Rivera looks like. I think Hoffman's there because he was so good for so long. And then after that, I think, you got the Gossages and the Fingers and those guys, because they would go 2 or 3 innings, different era, they weren't trying to blow guys away for 12 pitches.
Mhm.
The stuff wise, I think if you're going to put in some of these dominant guys, I think he's there.
From the era that we're talking about, the more modern closer. So probably the past 30, 35 years. So all respects to a Quisenberry, Vinny. I just had to throw that in. But yeah, Tekulve, there you go. But if you look at the modern definition of the position over the past 30 years, like he's either second or third best, depending on how you stand with Hoffman. Rivera's clearly number 1. And then you're saying all these guys, and I'd even say like there's a stronger case to make for Billy Wagner potentially because of the fact he was able to do it at such a high level for such a long period of time. When you have the Eric Gagnes of the worlds and some of these other guys that are like a couple of year flash in the pans, the Bobby Jenks of the worlds, et cetera, I could go on, and they flame out relatively quickly at that position. Level of attrition in a short period of time. Wagner was able to sustain, and to your point, Ted, like at age 38, his ERAs in the 1s, and he had more in him and he left. Like he didn't stay and accumulate more stats, but he was still dominant at the end of his career, just as dominant as he ever was. Like that's to me the stuff I say. Not every reliever needs to go in, but this guy was special.
Here's another one too. With the Mets, also, he tore his he had to get Tommy John. He had Tommy John at the end of the 2008 season, so he wasn't able to. So as a result, he wasn't able to pitch throughout the 2009 season. But he came back from it with the Braves, where he got that All-Star. So even then, even with the UCL, even with the torn UCL, you can go one way or another. In this case, it still helped out, and he was still getting a 1 ERA at this stage. Like absolutely phenomenal. As someone who even saw him when I was younger, I mean, he just was a different kind of cat. And I also know the Mets beforehand had John Franco, but Billy Wagner, as much as I like John Franco himself, Wagner was very different in terms of just how he was able to get the ball out of his hand and right to the catcher's glove. And even more impressive when you realize that wasn't even his born. He wasn't even originally a right. He wasn't even originally a left-hander. He was originally a righty, but he had to start throwing left-handed because of it. Like broke his arm, I think, at one time.
And I think if you look
you
at
know-
him, one of the key stats, if we talk about longevity, Ted, Dave, this maybe helps kind of with this too. See, technically, because of the way his career fell, I think he was technically an all-star in 3 decades. Like at the tail of the 90s, the 2000s, and then even 2010.
He was 99, 01, 03, 05, 07, 08, and 10. Yeah.
Here's another reliever from around this. May I bring him up? I know we're talking about Wagner, but we have to bring him up because he's very similar to play around. He's on this ballot. Could sneak in the 5%, could be one and done. And that is Joe Nathan, who I think who's probably up there with when it comes to relievers of the 2000s. The only relievers in that era with about 370 plus saves and a 151 ERA are him, Billy Wagner, Mariano Rivera, and Joe Nathan. So, I mean, if we're bringing up Billy Wagner, why don't we bring up someone like Joe Nathan or someone debating someone's going to be up next year who had a 62 save season. I know if you're really into relievers, if you really have that hard on for relievers, I think Francisco Rodriguez will be your guy. And I see Vinny,
I have a hard on for relievers. I have a really big hard on for relievers. Hey, listen, that's what Alex said. I'm just using his terminology. I'm very big with relievers personally. You were saying with Joe Nathan, myself, yourself. Nathan, I remember, local Stony Brook. He was a Stony Brook guy. He was from Texas. I know that he grew up in like lower upstate New York, but I also do know that, his save percentage was higher than others. Sorry if I'm like mixing up like what you were, just kind of threw off my rhythm a little bit. But I'd be down with Nathan. The only downside is that because of just how big the ballot is, and because there's only a 10-person limit, I can't have Nathan on my list. Even though I really would want to have him, I can't put him on there.
All right. So the hard on for Nathan's hot dog is done. Thank you.
Well played.
Thank you. That's why I'm the host.
That's
Yes,
right.
indeed.
Let's just wrap things up here because we've got a lot of guys who I don't think are going to make it. So I just want to feel a Hail Mary for any of the following guys that we haven't really discussed yet.
Well, Jimmy Rollins is looking like he's the only one besides Ortiz and A-Rod that's going to break that 5.
And where the hell did that come from with Rollins?
I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm just trying to, is it because he was clean and he had an MVP season and the position?
Likable guy. Yeah.
Likable guy? That's
He had a
not,
season where he had, I'll give it in 2007, he had a season where he had 20 home runs, 20 doubles, and 20 triples, and 20 stolen bases. And I think
that's 1 year. That was his MVP year though.
Yeah, I think it's one of those years where people are just so fixated, where you have that such a good of a year that it triumphs all the other years.
When you think about those Phillies teams, you think about Chase Utley and Ryan Howard first in some particular.
Yeah.
Right, Holiday.
My roommates.
I was just thinking
My
offensive players.
roommate last year is from Philadelphia. I can tell you right away. He thinks of all those guys. I think of Utley, and he thinks of Rollins, and he thinks of Howard. He thinks of all three of them in any order. He thinks of Rollins a lot because he won his MVP season the year before they won their World Series. So they do think of Jimmy Rollins. They do think of Ryan Howard. They do think of Chase Utley. They even think of Bobby Abreu as well.
Well,
I'd rather have
I'll
Bobby
tell you-
for his peak 10 years than Jimmy Rollins because Rollins' peak was awesome and then he fell off a cliff. And then it
Yeah.
wasn't.
Do you think that was Ryan Howard? He got killed by the injuries, even though he's breaking those young home run records.
I mean, like, these are guys that,
Prince Fielder too.
Oh, geez,
I
another
want to
injury
talk
guy.
Prince Fielder. Prince Fielder had a 12-year career that was really, really outstanding. It was only 12 years and it went off quickly, but he was top 10 MVP votes. I had it written down somewhere here. Like he played 162 games 4 times. He had 6 All-Star games. This is in a 12-year career. 9 out of 12, he played 157 or more. Half his career, he finished in the top 20 in MVP. So you're talking about a league that he's finished in the top 20 in MVP at least half his career. There's some good numbers there. It's the contrarian to the cumulative, but I don't think he's going to get the 5% to get a sniff and hang around and have people.
I don't think he's
appreciate it.
received a ballot yet or vote
Yeah.
yet. He has the same
Come
amount
on.
of home runs as his father Cecil did, 319.
And
Well,
12 years, he was bashing 45 a year for like 6 or 7
Yeah.
straight years.
He was a fun player to watch when he was coming up too. Good young guy. One of the guys that got baseball going again back in Milwaukee. And if I had a ballot, you would
Chris
give
going back to the Prince Fielder and Ricky Weeks days.
Hardy, Corey Hart.
Yeah.
But I'm just sorry. I was going to say, like, it's a shame, yeah, to your point that Prince Fielder may not even get the 5% because he would probably deserve at least that. I'm perplexed at where this love for Jimmy Rollins comes from. And
I know where it comes from. It mostly comes from the MVP seasons. It mostly comes from the MVP seasons as well as the numbers during that time.
he had
and
one
also being more of
MVP
a-
season.
They don't care. They see the MVP season and they call it a day.
And didn't even make an all-star.
Then put in Jeff Kent.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, it's
that's
the
my
same. It's the
thing.
same mentality. I'm saying they don't care. It's simple as that. They don't care.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was a good, solid player, but I think Kirk, you brought up the thing. Like once he dropped off a cliff, it was pretty precipitous and fast. And even when you look at his peak numbers, like they were cool, but he still wasn't a great hitter from a contact and average standpoint for a guy that didn't have a ton of power.
Rear 265 hitter.
Yeah, I mean, he was pretty good defensively, but was he that great?
Chris, you got that up. What was his career OBP?
Uh,
Because I don't remember
Give
getting
me that spot here. No, I lost him.
Here's another one who got killed.
324.
743.
Yeah, that's
Ugh.
Another guy. I saw you were not saying some nice things about him, but he's very similar to Bill Hodges, who was just elected by the Golden Days Era Committee, who was really good. I think he could have made the Hall of Fame if it wasn't for the shift and injuries. That is Mark Teixeira.
I didn't say bad about him. I just said I don't want to waste any time talking about someone who has no shot.
Here's one other Hail Mary I'm going to throw for. You're talking about injuries and amazing careers. There is no one on this list that I think exemplifies that more than Tim Lincecum, by far, when it comes to Lincecum. When it came to his time, this guy was a 2-time Cy Young Award winner, 3-time strikeout winner. He also pitched 2 no-hitters, and he's the only one of 2 pitchers in the MLB history to win multiple World Series champions, multiple Cy Young Awards, and throw multiple no-hitters and multiple All-Star games. The only one that ever do that is Sandy Koufax. Even though it was a very short 10-year stretch, but during his time, it could be argued that he was really one of the very best pitchers, not just in the National League, but in literally all of baseball. And
For years. Like this
what?
4 years. I mean, really, if you look at the numbers, it's 4 years. And that was the 2 back-to-back Cy Young seasons. Lincecum was great for his star burned very, very bright, but it was also very short. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, but at the same time,
4
injuries really
years.
cost him.
Well, yeah,
Right.
it's not about hey, what you could have been if you didn't get injured. It's the reality of what you were. It's unfortunate he could have been, but he's not.
Yes, but why not also
career.
congratulate and truly give him roses that he deserved when he was during that time as well?
I know
Because
but
he had 4 years that really count. That's not
Yeah.
to be a Hall of Famer. It's not a
That's true. I'm not saying I would put him in on the ballot. I'm just saying I'm just throwing him.
it
It's
out
called a
there.
Hail Mary for a reason.
Another really want to bring up, since I'm from Central Florida, he was one of the first, and he was really good in a time of power hitting. He was a really good contact hitter with the then Devil Rays. He went to Boston and then kind of sizzled out a bit with the Dodgers.
Okay,
That
don't
was
bring up
Carl Crawford. He was really good with the Rays, Devil Rays. Then he went to then he went to Boston and was okay, not as good as level with Tampa. Then he kind of gets injured and just fizzles out in Los Angeles. And I think it's because, no joke, he had association with the Kardashians. It's the Kardashians curse.
Oh, wait, that curse is a myth.
Somebody save us.
Yeah. I know I'm supposed to save here, but no, that curse is a myth. Reggie Bush was with a Kardashian when they won the Super Bowl. And the same year, Lamar Odom won the NBA title with the ugly Kardashian.
Sometimes it doesn't catch up to you immediately. It's
I didn't
the
say
long
that it
term.
didn't. I didn't say that it didn't work out badly after. That's
You said there's a
particularly-
peak that burned bright.
Yes.
But Carl Crawford, really? Like, I mean, good player.
He's on the ballot, period. Move on.
Well, I know
There's
he's on the
guys on the
ballot.
ballot.
No,
you know
what I'm
what?
saying is that is his recognition, is that he made the ballot and period.
And that's the end of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And to Ted's point, let's celebrate all these guys who did make the ballot, because
Right.
it's not a given that just because
You
you
have to play a
spent
long time.
10 years that you actually make the ballot. So all of these
Yeah.
people
Good players.
were very good players.
Another
But
one
they,
who,
but they weren't good
oh,
enough, essentially.
another
But
one.
it's-
No,
it's-
other ones.
No,
All
other
right.
Yeah,
ones.
I'm not,
All right.
I'm not giving another one, don't worry.
So
All right.
who's gonna get in? Does anybody get in? 1, 2? Is
Ortiz.
Ortiz, and that's it.
you think it's
I'll
In
bet-
Ortiz?
terms
and
of
I'll
that's
our
bet
own
on it.
list or what we think is gonna happen?
I think
what we
Ortiz-
think is gonna happen?
I think Roland could be the guy that just jumps right up
Not this
in the
year.
ballots we don't see.
Next year.
Maybe
I don't
next
think,
year.
Don't think it's
Next year,
possible.
from the way it's looking, it's probably not gonna be this year. Like, hell, Steve Marcus consider him and he still decides to leave his ballot blank because Steve Marcus is being Steve Marcus. I
He
would
wants
say
to
what I
protect-
think is gonna happen. I think we're just gonna have Ortiz and that's it. And it just turn off your notifications. It's gonna be a very ugly day.
So we don't think Bonds or Clemens or both get in.
No, that
I
that
want
Jason
them to get in, but I
Sardell,
don't think they are gonna get in.
I follow
Yeah.
Jason Sardell and all the predictors who do all the analytics based on how many votes have been in. And this guy is the most accurate out of all these procrastinators or predictors.
Prognosticators.
Yeah, yeah.
Easy for
Nate
us to
Silver?
say.
But I think he's the best one of it. And he's got Ortiz at 98% chance to get in, Bonds 0.002, Clemens 0.002, and Roland 0.0002.
So the accused steroid user that was the lesser player will get in over the 2 accused steroid players that were vastly better. That's fact.
Yep,
Correct.
I have no problem with this.
That's baseball.
Yeah,
That's
and
just
you wonder
life.
why people my generation don't really care for it as much.
And then the key is going to be, because next year you've got Beltran coming on, and other than Beltran and really K-Rod, who's fringe to talk about it at best, nobody else is really coming on, but you've got 4 guys coming off. So that's where you're going to see Roland as
Roland.
possibly being,
Helton will get up. I think Helton.
Helton will boost, but next year, Helton's not going to get in next year. So it might be Roland, maybe Beltran, depending on what happens there, but probably not. Next year could be your shutout.
All right, so let's see.
Again,
Let's close with this.
But then you got the today's game committee. They're gonna elect.
Oh, yeah,
they're gonna
but
elect
nobody-
someone.
But
Are you gonna
most
say
people are
Kirk?
going to rip that here's the ballot, nobody got in,
Yeah.
or maybe Roland gets in and nobody else.
Were you gonna say, Kirk?
I was just gonna say, let's see, out of the 7 of us, do we have a unanimous?
Ortiz,
Who should be in or who is going to
Well,
get
no,
in?
no, just if it just came down to the 7 of us.
Oh, like who would be in?
Yeah, if we
Yeah,
were,
who do you want? And do the max
Yeah.
if you need to.
yeah, so if we were to all vote right now, if we had that power, which we don't and never will, because I'm never gonna join the baseball writers and wait 10 years for it. And I don't
Right.
I speak for all of us, well, except for
I
you.
don't think Satan himself would join the baseball writers.
Oh, Satan himself might actually, I think he might be running it.
with the chair.
Yeah. So I think is there somebody that we would unanimously put in on this? Like,
Ortiz, I think.
I
Yeah.
don't think
So,
anybody.
I'm out on I told you I'm out on Bonds and Clemens, so that's gonna.
yeah, that's sort of why I'm just sort of like throwing Ortiz
Was
Right.
anybody a no on Roland? Like a no?
be in my 10. So
He's in my
In
10.
my 10, yeah.
He'd be my 10. I would
He's
say
in my 10.
I would fundamentally have to concern if Bonds and Clemens aren't in, then I'll be the shit and says no on Ortiz. Because I just fundamentally have a problem with
That's
the
fair.
accused steroids guy getting in over the much better ones. I mean, I'm sorry, it's just the way it is.
Right, but I mean, like, if we're just doing this as a unanimous thing, because like I'd be voting the same way you would, Jeff. but
Yeah.
I just want to see if we have if anyone would be unanimous.
Is Roland the safe one?
I'd say so.
I think so. I think Roland is the
Safe.
safe one.
Baggage-free candidate.
Or Helton.
I'm down with Helton. He's in one of my 10.
Elton.
I don't know if Helton's unanimous for me.
Hey,
Would be one of your 10?
Huh?
Wouldn't be one of your 10?
I would need more convincing because I look at the numbers.
so no, then, yeah, it's
Too many
fine.
flags, yeah. Like I look at Roland and I say he's one of the 10 best ever in his position. To me, that's a key differentiator. I cannot say that about Todd Helton.
I do think he's the greatest Colorado Rocky of all time. What that means, I don't know, because it's
Yeah.
exactly like saying the best Colorado Avalanche, just keeping it territorial.
But I was kind of borderline on Larry Walker too. It was kind of one of those things. Like if he got in, yeah, he was one of the most naturally gifted players I've seen in my lifetime. But the injuries kind of killed him. But I got it. Like okay, he when in doubt, put him in. I'm sure Helton will get in at some point.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
additionally, I just can't do it with Helton the same I could Rollins.
Because I think also too, so Ted, because you were sending me stuff about strategic voting, and maybe that's something just to sort of close, maybe another thing to close off with, because I think on a vote like that, I'd be voting for Bonds Clemens, even though Schilling said not to, still him, just for that purpose. And I know Helton's going to stick around. And there are other people that you almost want to have a greater look at, and maybe that's where Rollins is getting a little bit of love.
Yep.
No, I'm higher on Abreu than most.
Me too.
I like
That ain't
Abreu. I
cheap.
have someone that follows me that it's also very huge on Abreu. I mean, there's a lot of love for Mark
That ain't
Burley as
cheap.
well. Tim Hudson too. There's another
Tim
guy.
Hudson's on my fringe.
Tim Hudson's the best out of the borderline pitchers on the ballot. The along with the Burleys and the Pettits. I think Tim
I'd take
Hudson's the
Pettit.
best out of the three.
I would
But-
too.
But either way, Hudson's going to probably fall off. Unfortunately, where Pettit's going to stay on.
And what Burley thinks gonna barely hang on.
Where's Torrey Hunter?
Torrey Hunter, I'm
He's gonna
shocked
fall.
more people don't really talk about him, considering I know that the Gold Gloves say what you will, but you know that could be something that people look at. I mean, he's not in like the top 10 for me. I mean,
Not me either.
He's like better Mike Cameron.
that's an insult to
Look at-
Torrey Hunter. I wouldn't degrade Torrey Hunter like that. I mean, you know, he's
Corey, hey, Hunter had some power.
It's not a shot.
I mean, no, it's not a shot. I'm just saying, like, if I'm trying to equate like what his career is, like, I would think about Andrew Jones. I would rather have Andrew Jones over.
oh yeah, obviously I would go with Andrew Jones over, you know, Torrey Hunter. Like,
But regardless of whether he had Gold Gloves or not, you also knew that Torrey Hunter was a premier player at his position. Like we saw it, we know it, we felt it, experienced it. But he was also a franchise player there for a number of years in Minnesota. Like that's got to account for something at least. I just feels like another one of those pretty good players. Like power numbers are good, but not special. Average is okay, but not special. Defense is his claim to fame. Maybe if he stole more bases, you could say he accumulated more stats. Like it's one of those really good players, but
Yeah.
I'd be down for it just because I want to make people happy. That's how I look at it. I mean,
That's
I
how
know
you-
that may sound like I don't have any taste or standard, but in reality, quite the opposite. Because if I didn't have any standards, then, you know, well, he's not in my 10, in case you're curious. Like,
well, it's less about taste or standards. It's more about like doing the right thing or doing things that feel good. Don't really
well,
matter.
yeah,
Like,
I
doing
wouldn't
the right
care
thing
either
based
way.
off of the process. And, you know,
Well, yeah, he wouldn't be in my 10.
standards.
Like, I'm just saying I wouldn't mind, and I wouldn't try to hurt anything down. I mean, I think way too many people just try to look at it at such a high level when in reality it's a business like anything else. I mean, that's how I personally look at it.
but do I think it's ridiculous that Jimmy Rollins is potentially going to get like 30 to 50% of the vote and Torrey Hunter might struggle to get 10 or 15? Yes.
No, Rollins is going to be around 10, 15.
You
No
think so?
way, no way Rollins gonna get 30%. I can't see that. I can't even see 20. I think the most I could see him is like maybe like 12.
Think so?
But That's the
He'd be
most
one
I
of
can
those
see for
guys
Rollins.
that do better with private voters than public voters.
Oh, I'm sure.
I think
The
Rollins would be
Skell-
one of
The
those guys.
Skell voters are gonna like, are
They're
gonna
gonna
like.
jump
Rollins.
ship. Yeah.
That's actually a very good point. I don't think there's a lot of people, you don't want to publicly admit that you're voting for Omar Vizquel right now at this point. Which is not something you think 2 years ago. Again, so apologies for in the interest of time, because I've got another award-winning show that I've got to work.
Hey,
So, which,
hey, this is fun.
and if you want
Great to see everybody.
it's gonna all be about Tears for Fears. Shout! How the hell did that go #1? I got to promote what I'm doing. So
Hey,
why not?
you gotta do what you gotta do.
That's right.
Indeed.
Sucker's got to pay some bills. Anywho, not that this makes me a whole lot. It really doesn't. Anyway, stay safe, everybody. Have a good one. Thank you all for being a part of this, and we'll do this again next year.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.